I am going to go through really quickly Richard Tarnas's mandala of the evolution of consciousness, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, so bear with me through that part. And then I'm going to overlay what I think may be happening in the sense of the evolution of the psychology of the human race as it compares to the entire evolution of consciousness that Rick lays out. And then I'm going to propose a somewhat radical hypothesis at the end, so hopefully I'll get a little pushback on that, or at least some good questions. So here we go. So this is Richard Tarnas's mandala of the evolution of consciousness, and it goes like this. It starts here. It is the primal, moves to the archaic, moves to the axial, then to the modern, then to the postmodern. I forgot to draw the arrows, but that's the cyclical nature. So the red lines here represent meaning and purpose, and here, and in here, and in here. So what took place in the origin of our evolution, it seems, is though we were in a primal understanding and participation with nature. We didn't see ourselves as separate from nature. It was a participation that we were embedded within. And it wasn't until we started to move towards the archaic civilizations, which is where we developed cities, and there's like this movement of, placing the meaning and purpose that is inanimate within nature into the pharaoh, or into the king, or into the sky gods. It's this movement upward, and we're striving to organize our cities and our relationships to civilization. And then we move into the axial period. This is roughly considered the 6th century BC. It's when the cross-culturally monotheism was kind of put forth as a ascent into the cosmos. So there's a differentiation between the primal worldview, where meaning and purpose is saturated, to we place it into the heavens, into the cosmos, and we're aligning ourselves with it. God made man in his own image, kind of thing. So the whole movement is towards the sky, towards the heavens, towards the sun. And then you move into the modern period, where is really the most significant event in history. I'll explain that later maybe, but what happened was the human mind figured out a mystery that all of the previous modes of knowledge, all the previous religions didn't know, and that was that we were not the center of the universe. All the previous modes of understanding saw us as the center of the cosmos, fixed and not rotating, not moving. Everything else was centered around us as the center of meaning and purpose. When we realized we were just a planet moving around the sun, since then we've become less and less significant to it. We were the center of meaning, and now today we are one tiny planet amongst trillions, and the farther we look out, the less and less significant we are to it. So what happened was at the Copernican revolution, when this took place, when we figured out we weren't the center, we appropriated all the meaning and purpose that we had been placing here into our own mind, because we felt ourselves as superior to all the previous modes of understanding that had come. So we became highly inflated, and the last 500 years is an evolution of that inflation, of our sense of, quickly Descartes comes in and creates the subject, defines the subject-object division, to where we are subjective and the world itself is an object, and we are separate from it. And he's also, the idea would be that we would be able to assess the meaning and value and purpose of all of nature, because the human mind was separate in a special way to be able to do this. He was also recognizing our mind as being with the mind of God. Even Kepler, when he figures out the third law of planetary motion that solidifies the Copernican theory, he's seeing that as recognizing the mind of God, because mathematics is, in his mind, it's proof, it's a conviction that allows him to see what is a truth that the previous religions were telling us was so, wasn't so. Okay. Does that make sense somewhat? Okay. So then we move to the postmodern, and what happens is with Descartes, he's saying the objective world can be known, and the subjective observer can know it. Quantum physics, quantum mechanics, undercuts this. It describes the universe as a participation. There is no subjective observer outside of the objective world. The act of observing the objective world, you participate in it. Therefore, you cannot measure any objective world in and of itself. It's always a relationship. This goes back to what Matt was talking about with the individualism. It's not individuals, it's actually a whole. But what happens is in that process, it undercuts the underlying substructure of meaning at all. Like, right now, from what I understand, the universe is recognized as a randomly evolving process that accidentally created a meaning-seeking, highly intelligent species that seeks meaning in a universe that is told to us to be meaningless. This actually creates a schizophrenic kind of mindset in the human psychology, which is probably a big part of why we have such chaos in the world today. The really important parts of what happened with modernity is the human mind eclipsed all the previous modes of knowledge, as I mentioned. We get the correct math. The mathematics prior to that wasn't accurate. The discovery of the 3 outer planets, absolutely crucial to filling in the full picture of the astrological, which I'm yet to get to, but I will. And modernity also forges the autonomous self. You and I's individuality comes directly from the Copernican revolution and the American revolutions, American and French revolutions, because of the capacity to challenge authority. Because we had figured out the mystery that we were being told wasn't so, we figured out something superior, therefore we challenged all the previous modes of knowing. And the modern ascent of human equality and dignity actually comes out of this recognition. So at the same time, unfortunately, we disenchanted the cosmos because we found ourselves as superior to it. And so instead of seeing nature embedded with as much consciousness as we may have, we actually see it as a machine, as an objective, mechanistic process, and we're separate from it. So, okay, so this is what I'm suggesting may also be happening. You take the same mandala, and if you look at the primal worldview as an infancy of the child, that after the child is born, it's completely dependent upon the mother for survival, in the same way that the primal world, you're embedded in it, you don't see yourself as separate from it. The pre-toddler phase, you begin to sit upright, and you see objects, and you're starting to organize your reality in the same way you would organize cities in the early stages. And then the toddler phase, it's like, Mom is God. It's like that's the source of your reality, and Mom is telling you you're the center of the universe as well. So you have this relationship as seeing you're the center, and it is the source of your creation. And then you move into adolescence and really begin to develop your own perspectives that at some point eclipse what your mom and dad knew. You become, often you recognize a truth that's superior to theirs, and you kind of say, I think I got this one, and we'll worry about your perspective later. And unfortunately, this is what happened with the modern period. We threw out, the secular age comes out of the Copernican revolution. The ability to discount the religious perspectives is because we thought we saw it more accurately, which was true, actually, to a large degree. But unfortunately, adolescence is a very difficult process. It sees reality as a now. It doesn't think about the 7 generations hence. This is a big part of why we have such difficulty in our today's world. But I do believe, in the hero's journey, in the Campbellian hero's journey, it's the rite of passage is what moves you into individuation, into the Jungian sense of individuation. And you have to go through your own dark night of the soul, a rite of passage, in order to find your own gifts, your unique gifts, to bring back to the whole, to bring back to the community. And I believe that the disenchanted cosmos that we've created, 13 billion years old of meaningless and nothingness, is a self-projected rite of passage. We projected ourselves out into a meaningless cosmos in the same way the initiate is brushed out of the community in order to find themselves. The individual autonomous human is also forged in this process. Astrology done before the Copernican revolution was done for the king or for the pope or for the country or whether or not to go to war. It was not done for human psychology, and because human psychology in the individual sense wasn't developed yet. It really develops after, in large ways, after the Copernican revolution. So we're in the dark night of the soul. We're in this facing alienation, disenchantment, mass extinction. How to connect this back. So underlying all of it is astrology has been with us from the beginning. Astrology and astronomy were the single first science. We were trying to understand simply who and where we were in relationship to where we are. And that is an astrological understanding. It's astronomy and astrology diverge when you start to analyze the cosmos in physical, materialistic form, not in relationship to human psychology. That's where astronomy actually diverges from astrology. They're ultimately a single science. But my point is that the whole process through the evolution of consciousness was moving towards the sky, moving towards sky gods, recognizing divinity in the sky. And what I believe is actually taking place was a process that, of individuation for the collective, for the whole of the species, that we had to get the math correct. We had to get figured out we weren't the center of the universe. We had to find the outer 3 planets. We had to forge the autonomous individual. And now the capacity to reconnect back to a system of living symbols. I mean, it's all symbolic consciousness that led us here, the capacity to see symbol and ascribe meaning to it. Well, the planets are living symbols in nature that are deeply embedded in the interiority of our psyche. They're actually not separate from it. They're living symbols in the largest patterns in nature we're aware of that are actually also commensurate with the deepest interior parts of who we are. Now, there's one other thing I want to say, and this is a speculation, and it's an unfinished thought. When Descartes was striving to see this subject-object division, the idea was that mind was actually synonymous with God. He's actually very Groffian. He talks about how the mind can experience anything outside of the physical body, which is what psychedelic experience shows you. Your mind can experience any form of consciousness or anything that's happened in consciousness, irrespective of your body and where it is. So even Descartes is talking about this. But what he's trying to do is assess, just having a ground of meaning to assess value by, which the postmodern perspective doesn't have. We don't have a ground of meaning to assess a ground of meaning to assess value by, other than mathematics. Mathematics is the truest form of language we have, and it does the most accurate predictions we have. But here's the thing, the astrological perspective is grounded in mathematics. It's grounded in the alignments of the planets and in nature, the largest patterns in nature we're aware of, and in time. History, we can see cultural history manifesting through the archetypes. And here's the last thing I'll say. When Descartes was striving for this objective perception, it's undercut by quantum physics in that there is no capacity to have an objective perception on anything because the act of observing it influences it. What I'm suggesting is the astrological perspective recovers in part of what he was trying to do there. It allows for an objective, empirical observation of the universe, of cultural history, and of individual biography and psychology. But it also restores the postmodern flexibility of interpretive capacity because the archetypes are not concrete. They're multivalent. They're extremely rich in their expressions. And so they'll never, A plus B will always equal C or whatever. It's always an interpretive, poetic process that is now democratized, that potentially we all have the capacity to look at Freud's birth chart or the 60s or whatever so that we can all make assessments of what the archetypes mean. So it's not like there's this pre-given understanding of what they mean. It's emerging in our time, and we're all in a democratized position to assess what they actually are. So that was the big step thing that's still formulating, but please, any questions, or I don't know if that made any sense at all.
Yes, it made total sense. We have time. Actually, we don't have time, but we're just going to pretend that we do, based on what I was saying about the magic of the cosmology of love, that there would just be enough time for a couple questions for Chad.
Come on, bro.
Okay, I've got the big one, just like
Please.
I had the big one for Craig.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm with you, right? And probably a lot of us in this room are with you. And I love this. This is amazing. This is
Thanks.
serious take home.
Yeah, it's mostly Rick, by the way, and he could unpack every piece of this probably a course in each symbol. So
Yeah,
each
and he
diagram.
probably will. Yeah, at some point. But my question is, okay, it's a hard sell. We live in an era where, as you know, astrology is the poster child for pseudoscience and magical thinking, as if that's a bad thing. And any argument that you're going to have with somebody who is from the scientific mindset is going to say, astrology is all fine and nice, it's quaint, I understand the psychological value of it, blah, 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 have fun in your basement. But it's not going to change the world because we need things to be repeatable and verifiable.
Right.
So I'm going to do a study and I'm going to say, okay, what is the effect of Mercury retrograde? Are there actually more car crashes and more computer things? Okay, I did the research and I found out that is not true. Sorry.
Right.
Moving on. Move along. So, the question really is a big one, and I just want your take on it. And it's just, how does that conversion happen from people who are, because what I always say to people about astrology is that I'm not trying to convince you of its utility or its value in your life. And I can't do that unless you believe.
Unless you're open to.
Open to it and or already believe that the universe is a meaningful place. If I have nothing to sell you if you don't already. So how do we convert people into the idea to begin with that the universe is a meaningful place? I mean, this is then maybe a next step.
Yeah. But
just that crossing that first hurdle, how does that happen?
It's a huge question. Thank you very much. Really important. The way that I approach that, and I am really concerned with it because it's the academic mind that needs to be convinced on some levels. I am actually approaching it as an empiricism, as an empirical observation. And what's fascinating is one of the better studies I'm working on is actually the history of quantum physics, the history of quantum mechanics. And it is completely impressive as to the Jupiter-Uranus cycle. It's in Max Planck's chart. It's when he founded quantum mechanics. Einstein has it. Maxwell has it. When they found the W and Z boson quarks in 1983, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. In Solvay Congress in 1927, when they founded the Heisenbergian principle, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. When they discovered the big Higgs boson just recently, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. There is an underlying system of contextualizing even scientific history with the movements of the planets. And so my personal opinion is that when enough of this is rendered in a way that's palatable to an academic modern mind that is highly skeptical and needing evidence and proof, it will do that. The thing is, here's another example, like the Uranus-Pluto conjunction in the 60s correlated to that the radical revolutionary energy of that decade. Right now, they are square to each other. We all knew that was going to happen. We couldn't tell you that exactly what would be happening this decade, but I can tell you that this is a radical revolutionary decade, and we expected that. Now, I can also say that at the end of this decade, in 2019, 2020, there will be a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which corresponds to the World War I, World War II, the Great Depression, 9/11, Vietnam, and the last economic crash we just had. So at the end of this decade, there will be a different energy that won't be the same revolutionary, emancipatory energies we've felt for the past 8 or 9 years. Does that make sense? So to me, there is evidence, empirical evidence in history that will ultimately be seen by scientists in a way that actually proves it. But it will never prove it in a, this experiment reproduced will produce the same outcome type of way. It's not a materialistic science. It's an archetypal science. We are seeing archetypal predictions, not concrete predictions. It's much more analogous to, the uncertainty principle in that sense.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's my
Thank you,
pleasure.
Chad.